Hello, it's time for another one of those again, time for another video. Haven't posted anything for a couple of days. Um, and you'll notice that today I'm a little more casually attired. Uh, I'm actually in Hong Kong, and in summer the weather in Hong Kong is sweltering. It feels like a furnace inside a sauna. And today is one of those days. Very, very hot, very, very humid. Couldn't really sleep last night. So today I'm not wearing my very pretty tailored suit. Instead I'm wearing a rather stylish pair of trousers and an open collar shirt. Smart casual, I suppose we could call this outfit. Anyway, brief recap of the news. The state visit Donald Trump to the UK. A rather sickening affair, honestly. To watch this tangerine-tinted buffoon being given the guided tour of Buckingham Palace by our unelected head of state, and that decadent state banquet at which, if you looked at the top table, the principal guests, I think only one of them was actually an elected official. Donald Trump. The least likable of the lot of them, but at least, he has actually stood for election. Okay, let's be fair. Theresa May was elected by the constituents of Maidenhead, but she's essentially a lame duck prime minister. Power resides where people see that it resides, where people believe that it resides. Theresa May now has all the constitutional power of a dead duck. And yet she was at the top table and playing host to Donald Trump, making various statements about post-Brexit trade deals, which may or may not come to pass. What everyone seems to forget in all of this is that there can be no better trade deal than continued membership of the European Union. And that in any negotiation with the United States, the United Kingdom is going to be at a considerable disadvantage. It doesn't really have anything to offer in any sort of scale that the United States can offer. And of course, if the United States wanted access to British markets, there's very little that the British could do about it. That is the nature of trade. That should be the nature of free trade. And the position of people like Jeremy Corbyn, and in fact many politicians that I've noticed making statements about the position of the NHS and so on. Before I come on to the NHS, let me just make this statement about Corbyn. Who can take you seriously as an elected politician if you don't actually make your opinion heard, if you don't actually attend? I don't mean the flummery of the state banquet and all of this nonsense with the royal court and the hangers-on and the unelected officials, but what on earth is the point in passing up this opportunity to actually meet Trump and to actually put your point across? by excusing yourself from any potential meeting, you're only giving Donald Trump kindling for the flame, for the fire. You're only demonstrating to him that you're not to be taken seriously. I respect Jeremy Corbyn's position on many different topics. I'm not a communist. I'm not a socialist. I'm a liberal, international, Republican atheist. And I think on many of those points we would probably find agreement. In terms of natural justice and fairness, I am a social democrat. But on many of Corbyn's economic policies, I simply can't agree with him. But it makes no sense. It makes no sense as the leader of the principal opposition party in Parliament, as potentially a future Prime Minister, to excuse yourself and not to give yourself the platform to speak to him, to speak your mind, to tell him your thoughts, to tell him what real people in the country think. Because, of course, the demonstrations took place, the protests took place, the marches took place, but Donald Trump isn't going to see them. Donald Trump isn't going to pay any attention to them, closeted as he is in this ludicrous cocoon of security. The British Royal Court actually pales in significance to the utter tomfoolery that surrounds him. This panoply of security and various hangers-on. Probably between 600 and 1,000 people to protect this tangerine-tinted buffoon, this white supremacist, this racist bigot. Why on earth didn't you take the bull by the horns, use the platform you have, and go to the man and tell him what you and what the British people think of him? No. What did you do? You thought you were a student of, I'm an A-level politics student, and you went and spoke to the demonstrators. He's not going to take you seriously, and you wasted your platform. You wasted the opportunity you had to voice your thoughts and your opinions, and I would have had so much more respect for you had you actually looked him in the eye and told him what you think, and told him what the British people think. But there we are. I want to make a brief point about the NHS, and this is probably going to be the most controversial thing I'm ever going to say, and that tells you everything you need to know about the current state of politics, that it's simply impossible to have a debate upon what it seems to me to be almost untouchable public services. There's vested interests for you. The NHS. I've lived, travelled and worked all over the world. I wouldn't trust a doctor as far as I could throw them. For very personal reasons. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, in terms of my immediate family, I wouldn't trust a doctor. But certainly, my own experience, I could sum up doctors in one very short, pithy phrase. I've never had an illness that a doctor hasn't made worse. Whether it's been public hospital or whether it's been a private hospital, whether it's been a general practitioner, whether it's been a private clinic. I have never in my life had an illness that a doctor hasn't made worse. Medical practitioners are essentially charlatans. They really can do no more than me, actually. I'm a pretty knowledgeable, well-read person. I'm very well informed about certain things. And if I had an injury, I could treat it in very much the same way as any doctor or nurse could. And that's the extent of what the medical profession is able to do, to treat very acute injuries. But if you have an illness, a disease, a serious injury, or an injury which has been incurred through another accident, but doctors simply are negligent. They don't bother to think that, possibly we should possibly examine this particular area of the body, or we should possibly look at some diagnostic tests for this. No, they don't think about that at all. They are utterly clueless, and most of them are negligent and incompetent. And when it comes to the NHS, what exactly is the problem? What is the idea? And it is only ideological. There's no genuine rationale behind this. What is the ideological objection to perhaps private enterprise coming into the public service to do something better? If it can do something better, if it can treat patients more effectively and efficiently, why not? Surely some private sector initiatives, some private sector enthusiasm might be able to come into the NHS and say, oh, you're not doing that very efficiently. Maybe if you did it like this, maybe if you did it like that, we could cut out these particular expenses to put this into patient treatment. What is the problem with this? You are stifling debate on the future of this very inefficient service if you are simply not even going to entertain a debate on how perhaps some efficiencies could be made in the interests of recruiting more doctors, recruiting more nurses, making more money available for medical treatment, making more money available for all of the services that the NHS needs to provide, and in particular the enormous expansion in the services that will be needed for an aging population. What is the problem? There shouldn't be one. It is pure ideological intransigence, and the vociferousness of the vested interests that prevent this debate. I'm not suggesting that the NHS be privatised. I have lived and worked all over the world. I've travelled very widely, and I have suffered some illnesses and some injuries during that time. And what I know from my own experience is that when one is ill, it is the worst possible time of life. It is the worst possible experience. And to have to, for example, to have to be asked to pay up when you're sick, when you're injured, when you can't even think, and you're being asked to pay up hundreds of thousands of pounds in medical fees potentially, or when you're told you're not leaving this hospital until you've settled your $200,000 bill. This is by any stretch of the imagination and on any understanding of common human decency and justice and fairness, this is unacceptable. There always has to be a public service in times of acute need, in times of acute illness, in times of acute injury. But surely there are certain services and certainly certain circumstances when people should not be entitled simply to go to the hospital, go to the doctor and say, gimme, gimme, gimme. There needs to be a sensible debate on what exactly the funding formula should be for the NHS in the future. If it's going to go out of general taxation, people are going to have to accept a very significantly higher tax burden. But perhaps there are other funding formulas available. Perhaps there are other ways of providing these services, not only directly through the public National Health Service, but perhaps through some private enterprises providing non-essential services. And I don't see why we can't have that debate. It is utter madness to strangle and to stifle debate on what has to be, not only for the United Kingdom, but for every society globally, as the global population ages. These debates need to be had. How do we fund social health care? How do we fund health care and social care for an aging population, in addition to all the other priorities we have? Don't stifle the debate, don't strangle it. And to the medical profession, I say to you, you need to take a long, hard look at yourselves. The number of times I have had negligent treatment from a doctor makes me sick and makes me distrust you more than almost any other group in society, even more than politicians, and that's saying something. It makes me contemptuous of your claims to expertise, and I wonder what on earth you do at medical school for 7 years, because you're certainly not doing anything useful, you're certainly not doing anything practical, you're certainly not doing anything that you need to do. As far as I'm concerned, you're taking us all for a ride. So, please, don't strangle debate, don't stifle debate. Let's have a serious debate upon how we can fund public services and how we can improve the skills, the knowledge of our medical staff, of our qualified and unqualified medical staff. This is essential. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a very, very difficult position in the future, more difficult than we already are now. Okay, that's all for the time being. I'll post something a little later. Stay tuned.